Well, week 1 was crazy. Let's bring on week 2. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Podcast, a podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. If the Green Bay Packers knock off the Lions from this past Sunday and the Commanders who beat the Lions in the postseason, I'm going to be so insufferable. Grossi, and today we are going to be breaking down and predicting each game in the week 2 slate. Last week, I won a respectable 12-4, and while that is pretty good, 10 of you in the Pick'em League went 16-0. There are currently 10 users tied for first place, so a huge shout out to you for picking a perfect week. Again, if you want to join the Pick'em League, it's completely and totally free. The link is in the description if you want to join. And so let's kick things off with a Thursday night football game. You got the Washington Commanders taking on the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. Both these teams coming away with a win last week. The Commanders decimating the Giants. Their defense looked pretty darn good, or the Giants' offensive line looked really bad, or both. They were able to run the ball well with Wild Bill. They were able to get Deebo Samuel involved with the game. And listen, the Commanders, which we've been talking about this all season, lofty expectations after making it to the NFC Championship game last year, but week 1, and it is only week 1, it's always nice to dominate a rival. And heck, the Green Bay Packers would know a thing or two about that because the Green Bay mother-loving Packers took care of the Detroit Lions, beating them at Lambeau for the first time since 2021. And Packers fans have had a lot to be excited about recently.
Hi, yes, I'm calling because it's been more than 4 hours, and your ad said to call if it's been more than 4 hours.
I know I'm making that call. I don't know if I should advertise that. But the Packers able to take care of the Lions. Their defense was dominant, getting after Jared Goff, generating pressures, but his pressure also led to an interception, even more sacks. And Micah Parsons' presence made a huge difference, and he played less than 50% of snaps. On top of that, the offense incredibly efficient. Jordan Love had himself a nice clean day, except for those 2 interceptions that thankfully did not count. But overall, I was incredibly happy with the Packers week 1, and hell, it's always nice to beat the Lions. And so heading into this game on a short week, both these teams looked really damn good in week 1. I think the quality of the opponent was a little bit higher for the Packers. Sorry, no offense, Giants. But ultimately, I think this is going to be a very good football game. The Packers in the past have struggled with the run, but they did a phenomenal job limiting both Monty and Gibbs, holding them to less than 50 yards combined on Sunday, which is a phenomenal feat. They're going to need to do this again on Thursday, and with a mobile QB in Jaden Daniels, that adds another wrinkle that the Packers have to be prepared for. In addition, the Commanders were able to get a ton of pressure on Russell Wilson, and that defense played pretty darn well. Are they going to be able to get pressure after Jordan Love, who had a very clean pocket to work with? He was not sacked a single time on Sunday. Those are going to be the difference makers in the game. We'll see how good this Packers run defense really is going against a mobile QB in Jaden Daniels, and also a good run game that the Commanders possess. And ultimately, we'll see if that Commander secondary is able to slow down this offense. And of course, Micah Parsons, he knows the Commanders very, very well. And so ultimately for this game being played at home, I do like the Packers. Considering what I saw week 1, of course, it's only a small sample size, but if Micah Parsons plays roughly around the same amount of snaps that he did on Sunday, as long as he is able to disrupt that backfield, whether it's allowing guys like Lucas Van Ness, who had 4 pressures and half a sack, to get after the quarterback, or Rashawn Gary to get loose, I do think that it'll be a little bit too much for the Commanders to overcome. That being said, the Commanders can score at will, and their offensive line has gotten better with guys like Laramie Tunsil. And so I do think this will be a close game, probably closer than their games on Sunday, but I got the Packers getting a big time win at Lambeau Field. Then you got the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Cincinnati Bengals. Both these teams, they needed a hot start, so it's going to be a catfight in week 2.
Put up your tux.
The Jaguars taking care of business against the Panthers, and the two things that stood out. One, Travis Etienne, who the Jaguars needed to have a breakout season, already had a fantastic week one. Hell, they traded away Tank Bigsby, so they really must believe in Etienne. And on top of that, the defense, I know it was going against the Panthers, but the defense looks significantly better. Considering where that defense was last year, this is a pretty large improvement. We'll see if they're going to be able to carry it into this week against a more high-powered offense in the Bengals. And speaking of Cincinnati, they were able to come away with a rarefied week one win, knocking off the Cleveland Browns by a single point. They are lucky that the Browns did not have a kicker, because otherwise the Browns could have won that game. But ultimately, Joe Burrow, even though getting beat up behind that offensive line and really not getting a ton going on offense, was still able to get the win. And talking about that defense, while I don't think they're going to be a top 5 unit by any means, they still held their own against that Browns offense. And for this game, I almost picked the Jaguars to win, and I do think it's going to be a close game. The Bengals are going to have to establish the run, and we'll see if they're going to be able to do that against this Jaguars defense. But considering the offensive line of Joe Burrow, I am a little bit worried about the Bengals in this game. I think if Trevor Lawrence is able to connect early with guys like Travis Hunter or Brian Thomas Jr., they could start airing this ball out. And again, if you have Travis Etienne, who's able to run all over this Bengals defense, who knows? This might wind up being a trap game for the Bengals. But ultimately, I am going to go with the Bengals because I do think they have a more high-powered offense. I do imagine we're going to see Chase Brown being heavily involved in this game, and it's going to come down to that Bengals defense to see if they can limit the explosive receivers that the Jaguars do have. If the Jaguars wind up winning, I think they're going to start climbing up on some power rankings, because then maybe they finally turned it around. Liam Cohen coming in, he was a good OC for the Buccaneers, and maybe, just maybe, he's found a way to make this Jaguars offense come to life. But I am going to go with the Bengals and Joe Burrow because it's tough to bet against him. And so for right now, Kitty goes meow. Following that, you have an NFC East showdown between the New Jersey Giants and the Dallas Cowboys. The Giants, that was a game. Not only did almost half of their rushing attempts go for 0 yards, but Russell Wilson looked rough. And apparently, offensive lines are important. Just ask the Houston Texans. And for the Giants, the story really was going to be about that defense. If that pass rush can be elite, like a lot of people are predicting, that secondary has been rebuilt over the past couple of years, and I'm excited to see how that's going to evolve throughout the season. However, it's going to be difficult to win football games if they're constantly on the field and gassed because their offense can't do anything. And Giants fans, if I can give you just a little piece of hope right now, one more week of Russell Wilson is 1 week closer to Jackson Dart. They're going to be taking on the Dallas Cowboys, who also suffered a week 1 loss, this one against the Philadelphia Eagles. But I mentioned this on Power Rankings. I think the Cowboys deserve some credit. They went into that game heavily as the underdogs, and they were able to keep it pretty darn close. And if it wasn't for CD Lamb dropping a bunch of footballs, they could have won that game. And I saw the Cowboys are working out Jadeveon Clowney. We'll see if he winds up signing with the Cowboys to try and make that pass rush even better, which I thought they had a really good pass rusher. I wonder what happened to him. But for the Cowboys, if they're able to establish the run with Javonte Williams this season, that is definitely going to take a huge load off of Dak Prescott. Of course, they're hoping that George Pickens investment is really going to start to get a return as the season goes along and get their wide receiver 2 that they need. I still imagine a ton of targets are going to go towards CD Lamb. And looking at this game, whatever the Cowboys pass rush is, I think it'll be enough to get past whatever the Giants offensive line is. It is being played at home. I do think the Cowboys should be able to win this game. We'll see with how much ease it's going to be by, but I got Dallas winning their first game of the season. And for the Giants, like I said, 1 week closer. Then, you got an NFC North showdown between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions. Look at these two teams, both 0-1. What a world we live in. The Bears, a ton of hype coming into this season. They were off-season champs for 3 seasons in a row. They got the coach they wanted. Their QB should be as good as ever, besides that article that was just written about him. They got the frickin' Pope on their side. And after just 1 week, the Bears are right back where they started.
I hate my life and nobody can hear me say it right now.
Time is a flat circle, Bears. It's a flat circle. But let's talk about the Bears on that Monday night game, going up against the Vikings. And listen, the Bears defense was pretty damn good for 3.5 quarters. Now, I will say they probably got a little bit gassed because their offense after a while couldn't do anything. But Caleb Williams, especially in the beginning of that game, had some flashes, whether it's his scrambling ability and to extend the play. He's talked about how much he has loved Aaron Rodgers in the past, and you can definitely see some similarities there about how he's able to extend a play. But at the same time, he's also similar to Aaron Rodgers because he finds ways to beat the Bears. And Caleb Williams at times was just missing some open throws, and ultimately they blew that game, and it was a bad look. They're going to be taking on the Detroit Lions, who really stumbled into Lambeau Field on Sunday. Their offense could not get anything going except for that amazing Tesla catch at the very end of the game in garbage time, but their run game was all out of sorts. They were constantly just going for the short screen passes, stuff behind the line, nothing that was really innovative, and a lot of folks are wondering, is that because Ben Johnson is gone? Now, for both these teams, I'm giving them some leeway. Caleb Williams has to learn Ben Johnson's scheme, and that is a far cry from what he was learning or not learning with Eberflus, and so I'm willing to give them some time. And for the Lions, I know there's some Detroit fans that are worried, but you got to see how it's going to look over the next month or so and see if the coordinators and Jared Goff and that entire offense can get on the same page. Ultimately, I do think the Detroit Lions will win in the Ben Johnson revenge game. I just know that Detroit fan base is going to be loud at Ford Field, and I don't think Ben Johnson is going to get a fantastic welcome home. And so ultimately, I have the Lions winning here. I'm very curious to see if they're going to be able to establish the run against that Bears defense, which looked good against Minnesota, or if those running woes are going to continue for another week. But I got the Lions getting the win against the Bears, and again, whoever wins, I'm going to laugh at the loser. Following that, you got the LA Rams taking on the Tennessee Titans. The Rams, they were able to take care of business against the Strouds last week. That defense continuing to look good. And once again, it's a question of, is it the Rams defense or is it the Texans O-line? Thankfully, we have some prior evidence that the Rams pass rush is really darn good, and also that the Texans O-line can be bad. But the Rams with a bleeding Puka Nacua were able to get that win. It definitely was not the prettiest of games. Matthew Stafford also got sacked 3 times, but they were able to get the W. They're going to be taking on the Titans, who Cam Ward had his first NFL start this past Sunday and got obliterated by that Broncos pass rush.
I guess I'll just limp home then.
6 sacks on the day, and I know the Titans, their offensive line, they have been trying to make it better. They added some pieces during the offseason, but it was a tough debut. Now, all that being said, they are going up against a tough defense in the Broncos, who are expected to at least be a top 10 unit this year. The concerns I have for the Titans, besides having a rookie quarterback, is that entire offense as a whole. If they're not able to establish a ground game, or if they're not even able to block long enough for Cam Ward to get a ball to a receiver, it's going to be a very long season. I think that Cam Ward could develop into a really fun NFL quarterback, and I hope he's the starter there for a long time. He's just got to survive long enough to make that a reality. Unfortunately for him, he's going up against a very good pass rush in the Rams, and I imagine we're going to see some similar results that we saw last week, because if this offensive line can't block, it is going to be a problem. So ultimately, I am going to go with the Rams to get a win here. I wouldn't be surprised if this is a little bit of a closer game, if that Titans defense is able to contain Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams, but I got the Rams winning, and Titans, Cam Ward, just stay safe. Then an AFC East showdown between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins. Oh boy, let's talk about this game. Both teams losing last week. The Patriots, they had a good first half and then it fell apart. The protection really wasn't good for Drake May, and ultimately they lost to Geno Smith and the Raiders. And talking about the Patriots for a hot second, obviously there's some higher expectations coming into this year. Drake May supposed to have protection. You have the receivers now. You got Henderson in the run game. And of course, that defense should be pretty good as well. And the defense definitely wasn't awful last week, and I think is going to be the strong point, at least to start the season for the Patriots, as you hope that Drake May evolves throughout the season. They're going to be taking on the Miami Dolphins, who, good God, the Patriots at least had a good half. The Dolphins did not. They scored at least 8 points against the Colts, but everything looked awful. Tua was turning the ball over. They couldn't establish the run. The defense wasn't doing well. Bradley Chubb was just tackling random offensive linemen. It was a rough day. And for Coach Mike McDaniel, he really needs to instill some confidence in this team.
All I can do right now is put on a brave face and go out there and be their leader.
It's over.
We are screwed.
And honestly, I went back and forth with this game. I know it's being played in Miami, so it should be a little bit warmer, and the Patriots at times do not play so well in that Floridian heat. But the Dolphins, I feel like, are the ultimate you need to prove it to me team. Right now, they don't have a lot of things going on. They were talking about Darren Waller, and Mike McDaniel doesn't even know if he's going to play anytime soon. And considering that Jonnu Smith was able to have a touchdown last week, and Jalen Ramsey made that game-saving tackle, forcing the incompletion on Garrett Wilson, everything was just bad for Miami last week. And so taking a look at this game, I don't feel really confident in this, but I'm going to go with the Patriots to get the win. I think their defense, which might be better than the Colts, we'll see after the next few weeks, I think that they can contain Tua, and if they start forcing some turnovers, it could be a very long day for Miami. And plus, I think it's going to be tough to run the ball against New England. So because of that, I'm going to go with the Patriots to get the win. I will be pleasantly surprised if the Dolphins win. If that game against the Colts didn't happen last week, I would be picking Miami, but as of right now, I just can't trust the Dolphins. Then you got the San Francisco 49ers taking on the New Orleans Saints. The 49ers were able to get the win last week, but Brock Purdy is hurt with a toe and shoulder injury. Kittle's on IR, but hey, at least you cut Jake Moody.
So I got that going for me, which is nice.
The 49ers just recently signed Eddie Pinheiro. We'll see if that's going to solve their kicking woes. And let's take a look at that 49ers game, because the offense, besides all the injuries, the offense didn't look its absolute best. However, that defense was really darn good. The return of Robert Saleh, a lot of people anticipated that defense taking an additional step, especially where they were last season. And just with the small sample size that we got in week 1, that already looks to be working. And so I think the 49ers defense could be one of the better ones in the NFL this season. Of course, we have a long way to go, but that should give 49ers fans some excitement. Now, of course, taking a look on the other side of the ball, injuries abound. In addition, it was revealed today that Brock Purdy is a long shot to play this Sunday against the Saints, so this might lead to Mac Jones behind center. And listen, if they're able to put the game in Christian McCaffrey's hand and that defense is able to do well, they should still be able to get this win. They're going to be taking on the New Orleans Saints, who did not look as bad as I anticipated last week against the Cardinals. And that was a very winnable game for the Saints, which again, I don't know if that's a really bad look for the Cardinals or it just means the Saints don't suck as much as I thought they would. And for all the crap that Spencer Rattler gets, he didn't turn the ball over. He was pretty efficient, and they got to establish the run game as they had over 100 rushing yards. Is that going to be enough to beat this 49ers defense? I don't think so. And so while the Saints were a better team than anticipated last week, I think going up against the 49ers D is going to be a little bit of a problem. However, the way I think the Saints could win this game is that if it is Mac Jones that starts, if they're able to generate some kind of pressure or turnovers, maybe that can swing the game in the favor of New Orleans. But I'm going with the 49ers to get the win, and Saints, they're just going to keep on marching somewhere. Following that, an AFC East showdown between the Buffalo Bills and the New York Jets. The Bills, I mean, what else can you say about this game, man? They were down 15 points with 4 minutes left, and they still won in regulation.
Wow, that's almost impossible.
Well, first of all, through Josh Allen, all things are possible, so jot that down.
Josh frickin' Allen, man. Also, a Derrick Henry fumble helped as well. But the Bills, their defense looked atrocious for a good chunk of that game. They could not stop Derrick Henry on the ground. Lamar Jackson was dicing them up, whether it was with his feet, whether it was through the air with Zay Flowers. The Ravens were doing whatever the hell they wanted for a good chunk of that game, and they really seemed like they were in control heading into that fourth quarter, up 15 points. However, you can never count out Josh Allen and the Bills. You could point to the Keon Coleman grab on fourth down that resulted in a touchdown. You can call out Josh Allen just taking control of the game. You could call out the Derrick Henry fumble. You could call out that defense for stepping it up and forcing the Ravens to go 3 and out. Either way, this team, even though their defense didn't look the best, was still able to find a way to win against a really great Ravens team. And so, while there are a lot of things to clean up on the defensive side of the ball, whether it's in the secondary or it is that pass rush, knowing how good this offense can be, that should give Bills fans a little bit of hope while they're also having their high blood pressure just watching their football team. They're going to be taking on the Jets, who looked pretty good last week against the Steelers. That was a game that the Jets definitely could have won. Justin Fields looked pretty damn efficient, and we've been talking about this now for a few weeks. The Jets just seem like one of those teams, while they might not be a contender, they're trending in the right direction, as long as you don't fumble the ball, because then you're going to get cut by Aaron Glenn. And this game, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit closer than folks anticipated. The Jets do not have a bad defense by any stretch, but going up against Josh Allen and that Bills offense, that's where I think it's going to be a little bit too much for the Jets to contain. I'm curious to see how this Bills defense is going to do against Justin Fields. Maybe he's going to be able to scramble for a bunch of yards, and that could be a difference maker. But I am going to go with the Bills to get the win here. I imagine the Jets are going to keep it close, but it's not going to be enough. Following that, you got the DK Metcalf revenge game. You got the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Seahawks, this close from beating the 49ers. Unfortunately, a Sam Darnold fumble kind of ended any chances of that happening, as Sam Darnold was just seeing ghosts again. Hey, listen, I thought the Vikings were going to call Sam Darnold back after that Monday night game, so who knows? That could still happen. But the Seahawks, a little bit of concern with that offense. Cooper Kupp, who I said I didn't think was going to do phenomenally well with the Seahawks, didn't really add a whole lot to the mix on Sunday. JSN, however, has continued to evolve as a great receiver. The problem is do you have a very solid number 2 receiver? I know that's what Cooper Kupp was supposed to be, but yeah, there's some concern there. And so losing a heartbreaker against the 49ers is never fun. They're going to be taking on the Steelers, who looked pretty damn good on Sunday. And while, yes, the Steelers allowed the Jets to score a good amount of points, but Aaron Rodgers, 4 touchdowns, and yes, while some of them were to some wide open receivers, he was getting that ball out with a ton of speed and insanely fast. And if he's able to get into that cadence and rhythm, they're going to win some football games. And so I'm really curious to see how their offense is going to look this week going up against this Seahawks defense. The Seahawks defense, which should be much improved. They got a lot better last year. I'm curious to see how they're going to look throughout the season. This should be a pretty fun game. Being played in Pittsburgh, I am going to give it to the Steelers because I think their offense might be a little bit more dynamic than the Seahawks at the moment. However, we'll see how that secondary is able to hold up against guys like JSN, and we'll also see if DK Metcalf is about to have himself a game against his former team. But I got the Pittsburgh Steelers winning, going 2-0, and maybe to the Super Bowl. Following that, an AFC North showdown between the Cleveland Browns and the Baltimore Ravens. Well, these are two teams that are pissed off being 0-1 at this point, but I imagine Browns fans really enjoyed watching Sunday Night Football.
Oh, look at him choke! Oh, look at him suffer!
It makes the loss sting a little bit less. But let's talk about the Cleveland Browns. Obviously having some kicking woes, they had plenty of opportunities to beat the Bengals this past Sunday. And the thing about Cleveland is that they are still going to have a pretty damn good defense. It's just their offense that gives me some worry. I'm curious to see if Judkins is going to be active for this game because they had less than 50 rushing yards this past Sunday, and I think that if they're going to find a way to win, they're going to have to be able to rely on a run game. So whether Judkins is playing this Sunday or he's just going to eventually be eased into playing time, they need a run game sooner rather than later. But they're taking on the Ravens, who we just talked about suffered a cataclysmic choke on Sunday night, up 15 with less than 5 minutes left to go in that game, and they just couldn't get it done. Everything before that was looking great. Lamar Jackson, Zay Flowers, Derrick Henry, all were having phenomenal evenings, and the defense was looking really damn good against the Bills, until that final drive in which Jair Alexander let a big play go, and ultimately they allowed the Bills to get into field goal range and kick the game winner. And taking a look at this game, it's the AFC North, and you never know. I imagine they're going to play each other pretty darn well. I think the Ravens are going to be extra motivated to win this week, as they probably are holding a little bit of animosity in still from last Sunday night. I still think the Ravens are potential Super Bowl contenders. I still think they're one of the best teams in the league. So I have them winning against the Cleveland Browns in the Joe Flacco return to Baltimore game, which might cause some complicated feelings for Ravens fans, but I'm sure those will go away if you get a turnover or two. Then, one of the more intriguing games of week 2, you got the Denver Broncos taking on the Indianapolis Colts. Both teams coming away with a win last week. The Broncos able to take care of business. They had a phenomenal pass rush against a struggling Titans offense, sacking Cam Ward 6 times, as we talked about before. However, their offense left a lot to be desired. When they were able to lean on the run, their run game did pretty well. Bo Nix definitely had better days, and you had a whole lot of people in the chat calling them Bo picks. Now, it is just week 1, and I'm curious to see how they're going to do against this Colts defense, but as a Broncos fan, you want to see Bo picks start to progress throughout the season, and if he has another rough game this week, I don't want to say you have to panic, but things might start getting a little concerning. They're going to be taking on the Indianapolis Colts, who whooped the Miami Dolphins. Talking about that defense, maybe that defense is significantly improved from last year, and it needed to be. They finally fired the defensive coordinator, hiring the old defensive coordinator that the Bengals let go, and they looked, at least in week 1, significantly better. And taking a look at the other side of that ball, Daniel Jones and that offense looked explosive.
Those words, is it possible to use them in a sentence together like that?
Never thought I'd say that ever. But Daniel Jones was efficient with the football, was driving it down the field, and that offense played a clean football game. Now, I did not expect them to beat the Dolphins, and I know a lot of folks were not expecting the Colts to do very well, and we still kind of know where Daniel Jones' ceiling is. But hey, it's a new start of the season. He's got a great running back in Jonathan Taylor. Michael Pittman's a great wide receiver. Why not the Colts? Because on top of that, their offensive line did a great job at protecting him. They are going to have to be at their best going against this Broncos pass rush, which we saw last week. If they're able to replicate that success, it really doesn't matter what their offense does because that defense is lethal. And I almost picked the Colts to win this game since it's played at home because playing in Denver is a huge advantage for the Broncos. But I am going to go with Denver just because of that pass rush and that defense. And if Daniel Jones is able to have the same amount of success that he did last week against a much better defense, well, Indiana Jones is going to be riding again. Following that, you got the Carolina Panthers taking on the Arizona Cardinals. The Panthers, that was a tough loss and just a tough game to watch. Unfortunately, not being as successful as they would have hoped heading into the season. There were high expectations for Bryce Young heading into week 1. Of course, they go and draft a first-round wide receiver. They get rid of Adam Thielen, going, all right, this is going to usher in a new age of the offense, and Bryce Young didn't really look that great. Now, I don't think the sky is falling just yet, but if you're a Panthers fan, there is definitely some concern because this is a make-or-break year for who could be your franchise quarterback. And if Bryce Young isn't the guy, then you're going to have to go and start this process all over again. So I understand the concern. They're going to be taking on the Arizona Cardinals, who didn't look incredible against the New Orleans Saints. It was a little bit of a closer game than a lot would have anticipated, but that pass rush looked like it improved. Kyler Murray played well, and Marvin Harrison Jr., he had himself a real good day in his first outing of the 2025 season. And looking ahead at this game, you're going to want to see a better offensive performance from the Panthers and especially Bryce Young to hopefully move the ball against this improved Cardinals defense. However, I think I have to go with the Cardinals getting the win here, not just because they're my dark horse team, but because Kyler Murray may realize that he has an advantage over Bryce Young.
Wait a second. I am a towering half a millimeter taller than you. I win!
The joke is that they're both short. But looking at the Cardinals, if they're able to establish the run with James Conner against this Panthers defense and Kyler Murray's not turning the ball over, I do think the Cardinals should be able to get the win. Again, the focus is going to be on Bryce Young and seeing if this Panthers offense can move the ball. And if not, yeah, that optimism died pretty darn quickly in Carolina. Following that, you got a Super Bowl rematch. You got the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. The Eagles taking care of business against the Cowboys, and even though Jalen Carter spit on Dak Prescott, he is not going to serve any more time for suspension. They said, hey, just that one game is going to be enough. They're going to fine him, and now they're going to get one of their best defensive players back. Oh God, unless Jalen Carter does it again.
You want to see me do it again?
But what impressed me about the Eagles, even though there was definitely some sloppy play, was Jalen Hurts. He looked really, really good. And even though the Cowboys did a nice job of containing Saquon Barkley for the most part, Jalen Hurts was a monster, even though A.J. Brown was almost non-existent in that game. And that is very exciting to see. I know that Jalen Hurts usually gets a lot of disrespect, but there was plenty of times on Thursday where he took the game into his own hands. Whether it was evading sacks, whether it was rushing in for touchdowns, Jalen Hurts looked like that guy. And they're going to be taking on the Chiefs, who technically, the Eagles already beat once in 2025.
You want to see me do it again?
And they might be catching the Chiefs at the perfect time because they just suffered a loss against the Chargers. Xavier Worthy getting banged up in that game by Travis Kelce. They're not going to have Rashee Rice for another 5 weeks. And so the amount of receivers that the Chiefs have, there's not many. And so taking a look at that Chiefs offense, which struggled against a good Chargers defense, I imagine they're going to have some of the same problems against this Eagles defense. If they're not able to get Isaiah Pacheco going, it could be a long day, and it just puts it in the hands of Patrick Mahomes. And you saw what he could do against the Chargers, whether it was that long fourth down conversion being chased by Khalil Mack. But I think the Eagles being healthier, having Jalen Carter back is going to be an advantage that the Chiefs are not going to be able to overcome, even though they're playing at Arrowhead. So I am going to go with the Eagles to get the win. I do think this Eagles offense can move the ball against that Chiefs defense, who didn't look their very best on Friday. It could be because they were on the field a whole bunch, but I imagine the Eagles will get the win, beating the Chiefs for the second time in 2025, and the Chiefs starting 0-2. Then, this is an interesting one. You got the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Minnesota Vikings. The Falcons, unfortunately, unable to get a win against the Buccaneers last week, and they looked pretty good. Michael Penix was efficient with the football. Bijan Robinson had a great game, especially in the receiving game. And the defense, they looked pretty solid too. The only thing that didn't look good was their kicker, Younghoe Koo. And unfortunately, he started to regress a little bit last season. I was hoping he would have a rebound, but missing that kick at the very end allowed the Buccaneers to win that game, and Falcons fans were once again crushed, but then again, they kind of are used to it at this point. They're going to be taking on the Minnesota Vikings, who were able to have a miraculous comeback against the Chicago Bears, which was surprising because J.J. McCarthy, he looked like he was in trouble early on.
Oh, call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me.
But then the fourth quarter happened, and J.J. McCarthy took over that game. The Vikings defense made the stops that they had to, and they scored 3 unanswered touchdowns to defeat the Chicago Bears. And J.J. McCarthy in his first start looked like he was making his first start. And while there's things that you can point at that definitely need to improve, including starting a little bit faster, you got to give the guy a ton of credit for being able to rebound and come back, especially late in that game, and get his team the W. Now, I think this game is going to be incredibly competitive. Like I said, the Falcons looked good last week. The Vikings offense for 3 quarters did not look good. Can the Vikings get started a little bit earlier? Can they get Aaron Jones going? And of course, Jordan Mason, who might start getting more carries than Aaron Jones at this point, he looked really good as well. So if the Vikings are able to establish the run against the Falcons, I think the Vikings can win. However, I am going to go with the Atlanta Falcons here. And you can't even call me a hater, even though I am, because I picked the Vikings to win this past week. But I'm going to go with the Falcons to win just because if they're able to get a quick start and Bijan Robinson's able to get things going and Michael Penix doesn't turn the ball over, I think that Falcons secondary might be able to take advantage of J.J. McCarthy. He, of course, threw a pick 6 against the Bears. And for the first 3 quarters of that game, that Bears defense, they were all over JJ. And so if the Falcons are able to do something similar and they're able to score a bunch of points that the Bears were unable to later in that football game, I'm going to go with Atlanta to get the win. I do think it's very possible that the Vikings wind up winning this game, but I'm going with the Falcons. And if they let me down, well, then I'll just be like every other Falcons fan. Then, the first of 2 Monday Night Football games. You got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking on the Houston Texans. The Buccaneers, like we just talked about, able to get a win over the Falcons this past week. And while, yes, Younghoe Koo missing that field goal, which would have tied the game, definitely helped, let's talk about Igbuka, because Baker was baking and his brand new wide receiver was looking really damn good. And the Buccaneers are definitely favored to win the NFC South this year. I think their main competition is going to be the Atlanta Falcons. So getting that first game out of the way and getting a win like they were unable to get last year, minus Chris Godwin, minus Tristan Wirfs, the Buccaneers seem like they're a team that are just going to get better as the season goes along, barring everybody's healthy. They're going to be taking on the Houston Texans, who had a very rough outing against the Rams last week. While their pass rush was pretty good and was able to get after Matthew Stafford and bring him down 3 times, Derek Stingley suffered an injury. And taking a look on the offensive side of the ball, well, I could just imagine David Carr looking at CJ Stroud behind that offensive line.
First time.
Yeah, turns out the offensive line is a big old problem. Losing Kenyon Green, no problems there. Losing Tunsil, bit of an issue. CJ Stroud definitely was not at his best this past Sunday, and we're going to see how good he can possibly be behind that offensive line. I do think they have some good depth at wide receiver. I'm excited to see if Higgins can get things going. I love Nico Collins, but you eventually have to have some kind of blocking and protection. And taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers here, I think this could be a really close game, and it should be a fun one on Monday night. But I'm going to go with the Buccaneers to win for a couple of reasons. One, with Stingley being banged up, and I haven't seen an injury update as of right now, I think that the wide receivers for the Buccaneers, whether it's Mike Evans or Igbuka, can take advantage of that secondary and they can score some points. On top of that, while I do believe in the Texans pass rush, I'm curious to see how involved Bucky Irving is going to be. He didn't do a whole lot last week, and so if they're able to get him involved with the game, I think the Buccaneers should be able to win. And ultimately, even though there are some question marks with the Buccaneers pass rush, taking a look at that O-line, that gives me some grave concern for the Texans. And so while they're not going to have to contend with the Rams pass rush again, which is a good sign, CJ Stroud is going to need to have himself a really good game because I think the Bucs are going to be able to put up a good amount of points. And so here, I'm going to go with the Buccaneers to win. The Strouds will not be happy, but if they win, then they're probably just going to blow up my car again. And then finally, an AFC West showdown to cap off week 2 on Monday night. You got the LA Chargers taking on the Vegas Raiders. The Chargers, whew, what a freaking win against the Chiefs on Friday night. Justin Herbert played phenomenal football. The defense was suffocating, and this could usher in a new era for the AFC West. And what I mean by that is the Chiefs are the only ones with a loss in the division. But you have to be impressed with the way the Chargers played that game on Friday. Going on the road in Sao Paulo, even though they were the home team. Like I said, Justin Herbert played a phenomenal game of football. Hampton looked good in the limited amount of carries that he got. I'm excited to see what he's going to do this week against this Raiders defense. And guys like Quentin Johnson stepped up, and Keenan Allen looked pretty damn good too. So they might be one of the more balanced teams in football this year. And again, if they get that run game going like they did last year, watch out. The Chargers could be contending for that AFC West title. They're going to be taking on the Raiders with a brand new quarterback in Geno Smith and a brand new head coach in Pete Carroll. They got the job done against the New England Patriots. And while there was some definitely to be desired, Ashton Genty did score his first touchdown, even though he wasn't getting too many yards per carry. And for the Raiders, it looked like their offense was at least better than what it was last season. Geno Smith was able to ball out, and Brock Bowers thankfully did not suffer a significant injury. And the Raiders are in a nice spot within the AFC West, not only getting that week 1 win, but going forward, maybe they could be a wild card team if they're able to put things together and Ashton Genty is able to run even more. However, I don't think they're going to find the same level of success that they had last week against this Chargers defense. I think it's going to be even tougher to run the ball against them, so Ashton Genty might not have a great day. And on top of that, if Justin Herbert's able to play the way he did against the Chiefs, then the Raiders might be in trouble. But this is a divisional game. You never know. I don't think the Raiders are going to score 60 points or anything like that. But ultimately, I got the Chargers getting the win here, and it's mostly because of their defense going up against this Raiders offense. If their offensive line is able to protect against Max Crosby and Justin Herbert has time, we saw what he could do against the Chiefs. I imagine he'll do the same against the Raiders. So because of that, I got LA with the win. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who do you got winning this week in week 2? Let me know what you think. You know, I saw me at TomGrossiComedy.com, and a big shout out and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel. And thank you so much for watching. We have been growing very, very quickly on YouTube. We are getting closer and closer to 900,000 subs. The show is and it will always be free, so feel free to subscribe. It's free to do. It helps out the channel, and we're getting one step closer to 1 million subscribers. But thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi, and as always, go Pack Go.